And we're recording. Welcome, folks, to the latest edition of the Coaches Connect call. I'm Coach Jeremy. We have a jam-packed agenda lined up for us right now. Folks here, I've already opened the floor. We've had a few questions. Nothing that requires an immediate discussion right now, but of course, during the course of our conversation, you are invited to unmute and share feedback on the specific conversations, as well as start your own conversation. If you want to put it in the chat box, I'll be sure to bring it up as we go through. Uh, our first conversation, I'm actually going to share my screen for a little bit here. So if people are looking on and they're watching the recording, they can also see a little bit of what I'm talking about here. So our first discussion here comes from Coach Paul Buono. And a quick summary here, it looks like Coach Paul is starting to move away from weighing and measuring for foods when their clients are using their dietary tracking strategies, and they are encouraging them to use the hand portion tracking. Of course, this leads to a little bit of a discrepancy in terms of how do they track some food items that are less easily visually identifiable, or things that may not be consumed after the cooking process. So we're talking about dietary fats here, which again, through cooking will be absorbed into certain foods. They may not be as easily to or easy to identify. And he goes on to list a few different examples. So this is a very practical, I think, question from this coach. So I'll stop sharing my screen here. Coaches, I'm curious to know, what are your thoughts on this case study? How would you tackle this conversation in terms of giving feedback to the coach, and potentially what would you say to the client in that situation?
Hi, it's Bernadette. I have
Hi,
a
Bernadette.
I have a question. So, is the question pretty much if you cook it in oil and you are, let's say, you are making stir fry, and you put a tablespoon of oil in the pan before you do the stir fry, how do you measure it after it's cooked?
I believe so. So it looks like you got to kind of parse through this question a little bit. The way that
Yeah.
I'm interpreting it is, uh, it sounds like they are measuring, yeah, post cooking. So again, where it's not as visually evident.
Oh,
Uh, the obvious example here would be like, oh, easy. If you're cooking every single meal that you're making, uh, if I add roughly 1 tablespoon of some sort of dietary fat, let's say it's coconut oil,
mhm,
we call that 1 thumb roughly as an equivalent.
mhm.
Track that there, and then divide it by however many meals that I'm making. So if it's for one meal, 1 thumb of fat,
Right.
very straightforward. If this is something where I'm batch cooking and I'm going to have this for multiple meals, divided by the 4 meals that it makes, and that's a 1/4 thumb of fat there each. That is
Right.
a quite logical way to go about it. But I think they give the example here, like if someone else cooked vegetables for you and they were cooked in some sort of fat, like butter or oil, how do you account for those things? So I think they're trying to kind
Okay.
of bridge the gap in terms of
Okay.
how do I have a greater sense of
Uh-huh.
my tracking and how do I gain more accuracy here? I think
Yeah.
that's the underlying question. Does that give you a little bit
Yeah.
more there?
Yeah, and my answer is you can't. I mean, it's just like going to a restaurant. You don't know, from what I've read, the calories are often off, right? And even the FDA, I believe the nutrients or the ingredients, they're they're able to be 20% off in their caloric intake or their nutrients. So you can't be exact at all. And I mean, even like a simple example as an apple varies, right? So you may get an apple and you'll see, okay, they're saying it's 100 calories. It may not be exactly 100 calories, right? So they're always estimate so it's always going to be off. You cannot be exact unless you're in a lab somewhere testing your food and the level of energy that you use in I mean it's you can't be. That's my thought. And I mean to be that precise, I don't really know if it's really necessary, in my opinion. But that's my thought.
Strong agree. I saw Kavor, you also unmuted there and you wanted to add in something as well. Do you have something to add to this conversation also? You're currently muted.
Sorry.
All
Um,
good.
yeah, I was going to say kind of in essence what you guys are saying, like the obsession, the whole psychological getting overwhelmed with, oh, am I tracking and am I eating perfectly? And the ramifications of that from a mental emotional perspective.
Yep, strong agree. So, before I share my thoughts, any other additional insight here from our coaches? Marta.
Yes, hi. Yeah, I didn't raise my hand, but I would say that yes, I agree, but also that this person is showing the willingness to know how many calories do we have in the meals. So instead of going, okay, this is very difficult to gauge. This is like almost impossible because it is. It is almost impossible because we don't know. We don't have the um the tools to know how much fat there is in the meal. But instead of that, we can go with how does it feel? Does it feel very greasy? Does it feel that it sits too heavy in your stomach? Does it feel that you're kind of overloaded with this kind of sensation that there is a lot of fat or not? Is it too hard to swallow because there is no there's nothing in it? So instead of I will look at the bright spot of the person the client that is trying to find the way to gauge, but also give this client the cue that the best advice ever is going to be listening to your cues, to your own cues, because yes, we have the hands, but and this is a very useful tool, but sometimes it's not enough because we are never sure about the fats, because that's actually one of the biggest problems with my own clients, the experience of gauging how much fat there is. Obviously, if you're going to cook your own food and it is only for just for you, that's going to be easier to use a spoon or something. But if not, I say that go with your gut. And also one thing that is important, fats add a lot of calories. So if this person is absolutely mindful of their amount of calories in a day, because if this person is trying to gain weight or lose weight, we need to be in that caloric deficit or excess of calories. So that's going to play a very important role in the day, in the ingestion of the whole thing. Yeah,
Yep,
that's my
awesome.
2 cents.
Thank you for adding that. Charlie, you unmuted as well.
Yeah, I was just going to sort of tag in on Marco, if that's all right. Um,
Please.
Full disclosure, I only kind of announced my certification in the last couple of days or so, but
I saw. Congratulations.
thank you very much. Um, but having sort of been on the other side of this kind of being coached and stuff like that, and being someone that struggled with that transition from rigidly counting to going based on like feelings, um, some sort of interim framework that might help in terms of if you just implement it consistently, uh, particularly on Marta's point about if their goal was to lose weight, um, is think about how the meal's been prepped and then just have like a little idea, like a little framework of what you might log that as. So, if it's been steamed, you'd say maybe add nothing. If it's been roasted or baked, you'd add a thumb or calories for 1 tablespoon of oil. If it's been fried, you might add 2 thumbs, or if it's been deep fried, you might add 3 thumbs. I think the actual value probably doesn't actually matter that much, but It's just that you're adding that consistently. Yeah, just
That's
food for
incredibly
thought. I don't know.
No, that's incredibly useful. So I like the spread of responses that we've gotten here. So one, as a consensus from the community, it sounds like yes, we're never going to get absolute precision here. There are things that are just going to be impossible to account for, especially if you are consuming food that you didn't prepare yourself. So as our coach mentions here, Coach Paul, uh, if I'm eating something at a restaurant, how do I account for kind of those measurements there? And the brief answer here and succinct answer is that you just really can't. Uh, the thought pattern I have whenever eating at a restaurant is like, why do these vegetables always taste way better than when I cook them myself? It's like, yeah, because there's like a metric ton of butter and salt added to them, and that's why they taste better than what you normally cook at home, which is great. I mean, occasionally, uh, it is an indulgent experience. Uh, I really like the feedback that Charlie shared there in terms of if you have a client who is really pushing back on the idea uh, of kind of allowing it to be imprecise and it just like doesn't jive with their framework. They're a very like maybe analytical person, or they're just not ready to accept the idea that less precision can still deliver the results that they're looking for, as Bernadette mentioned. I also agree with that. It's like, do we need this level of precision? Probably not, depending on what their specific goal and time frame is. It's like we can probably make really good progress by controlling more easily controlled variables and accounting for those things. But if they are someone who's like, I just gotta have something to track, and that is the choice that they're making, then yeah, the example that Charlie gave is, hey, let's break it down into different food preparation methods and assign a numeric to each of those preparation methods. So if you can easily identify that says, hey, this was steamed versus deep fried, have a few intervals in between, and then just have ways to account for those, it does give them more sense of control. It probably puts them a little bit closer in accuracy. And again, actual amount to the gram precision is not important, but it gives them another way to make informed choices that they feel better about. That works out really well. So hopefully Coach Paul will catch a replay of this and see that feedback in the future. But I'm really glad to see that in general, coaches here are on the same page. I will add my own context here as a coach. In terms of dietary awareness, dietary fat tends to be the last thing I address with most clients, simply for the reason that Coach Paul is pointing out here. It's just visually harder to do, especially if you're not preparing all of your own meals. So, as Bernadette and others have pointed out, sometimes you don't really need to get to that granular level before progress starts to initiate. And for some clients, I actually never really cover the topic. We talk about what are healthy fats? Are you regularly consuming them? Are you consuming them at a level that feels satisfactory to you? If so, then we can utilize other tools to get the job done. As Marta said, uh, in situations where we're getting precise measurement is not possible or easy to implement for a client, using other tools, more objective tools in terms of our hunger and fullness cues, uh, other textural cues, we can utilize those in its place for that time and then just pick it up again at the next meal or the next opportunity. Cool. That is a good place for us to start for today. Uh, Before I queue up our next conversation, coaches, let me get rid of this one. Any additional comments or questions from this group assembled here?
I wanted to just share that I do a lot of the spray oils, especially if it's saute or and you can get your own spray bottle so you're not using that stuff that ruins the environment. Um, but I think that really helps me to control my oil, and I can pick the oil. And sorry, it's so loud. I'm leaving the gym right now.
All good.
Yeah, there is also the fat that's inherent in the food itself. So somehow do you account for that also? Like some foods are high in fat, like say milk or low fat milk, or like, some meat, lean meat versus other types. So other than the added fat.
So as kind of, I'll say, as I believe this, Charlie mentioned this. So in certain food situations, I would say the majority of foods actually, they're going to be a mixed composition of macronutrients. It's very rare that something is like very predominantly just protein or just carbs or just fat. There are a lot of food situations where there's going to be a mixed composition food. In those situations, you can decide to say, hey, for the context of what you and I are working on, client, we're going to say milk for you is a protein source. So that's what you're going to count it as. In different contexts, you might say, we need a little bit more granularity here, client. We're going to actually go, it is a 1/3 milk, 1/3 carbs, 1/3 fat. It can scale in complexity depending on what the client's needs are and what their ability is. But between you and your client, you can decide what is actually the most helpful for us in this in the context of what we're working on and the skills that we're building. So there is absolute evidence, or like there's an absolute way to define things. It's like, great, if you have a laboratory setting and you can do those things, by all means. But then there's a practical application of what does coaching look like. So in a practical application, it only needs to really make sense between you and your client. Another example I can give you for this one here is that when I'm talking about eating more, there's a pro coaching lesson or practice called eat more veggies. In the context of that one, for my clients, I actually want them to eat more plant-based food from wherever. So we just call it fruits and veggies. For some fruits, they may be higher in dietary carbohydrates or in sugars. Should they go into a different category? Should we move them around? It's like, maybe, but in the context of what I'm working with and the clients who I serve, the skill level that they have, no one's being harmed by eating more bananas. No one's being harmed by eating more mangoes. It's still beneficial from a dietary perspective. So we create our own nuance there. There's shared meaning between me and the client, and it moves them in the direction that they want. That's all that really matters. So hopefully that makes sense for you, Shanta, as well. Our second, sorry, did someone have anything else to add? Nope. Hopefully that gave you a brief moment to kind of read through our second case study for today. So this one is from Coach Sarah, and Coach Sarah is asking, how do you handle the conversation when clients think everything is full of junk and or chemicals in it? So you're trying to explain actual facts about certain things, but they can't get out of that fear state of how they look at food. I think this is a really interesting conversation, and there's a lot of good feedback. I would encourage folks to go back and read through the comments. There's several different viewpoints here, but I think there's some really strong answers within there. But I'm curious to see, how do coaches here handle that conversation? So I'll stop sharing here.
I think I would go back to their why, and then also to where their research is coming from of the intoxin or whatever toxins that are coming from all their foods. And then be aware of the controllables.
What specific questions might you ask in that situation, Aubrey, to understand their why a little bit more?
And it's difficult because I don't know this client and don't know the history of, but
assume that this is someone who you may encounter in the wild, maybe as a professional or someone you just encounter at kind of like a dinner party.
Yeah, and then so I would
unfortunately,
go,
this person is more prevalent than they used to be. So
yeah, I would do
as
the
soon as
5
they find
whys.
out.
So I'm sorry. I would do the 5 whys and like, why is it important that you don't eat chemicals? And then, well, because it's not healthy, well, why is it you want to be healthy? Just kind of go down that and tie that back into that, then tie in their why into their controllables.
So understanding a little bit more of like, where does the seed of this kind of thought pattern come from?
Exactly.
Cool. Coaches, what else do we got?
Yeah, what toxins are they talking about? I mean, what is their idea of a toxin?
That is certainly one worth exploring with that client. When they use the word toxin, what are they referring to? I'm going to say that if this client is working with this nutrition coach and that is their concern, they probably do not have a degree in toxicology or a related field. It is probably worth at least spending some time on asking deeper questions here. specifically so that the client doesn't feel like we are dismissing their concern. If anyone has dealt with any medical professional, I'm going to say, and not to say we're in the same boat, dealing with someone who is an expert in their field, and you bring something that you feel is a concern to you, and it gets dismissed like right away, feels very disempowering. So we want to empower our clients to be like, hey, be curious. Feel free to ask questions, especially in the space that we are providing as coaches. Is this likely a relevant concern? That is going to be a little bit more debatable. But there's still probably some more things that we can do before we respond to this client. Any other questions that we would ask, or anything else that you feel like should be addressed here from the coaching side?
What about the moving away from something and moving towards something, like the avoidance versus the rather than avoiding, moving to something that feels good, like you're saying? Oh, sorry, I dropped myself. I'm trying to think of how they talked about this. Do you know what I'm talking about, Jeremy?
Yeah, so instead of like, hey, here are like a list of 10 things that like I can't eat, I have to avoid at all costs because of reasons. It's like, okay, cool. What are some things that can fill the gaps for you there? What are the things that are maybe similar enough that you feel comfortable eating? What are the exact same things and you just want to pay a higher price point because it has some label on it? It's like, sure, you can do all those things. And I think that kind of brings us to that next stage of like, what do I say to the client as their coach? Similar to what we discussed, I don't know if it was last week or maybe the week before, in terms of energy required to dissuade a client of a certain idea that they may possess. The energy required there is like, this is going to take some time in our session. This may actually cause a rift between me and this client, especially if this is like a strongly held belief that they have. And then I have to ask the question, is it worth it to devote that time and energy to try and do this thing? By and large, it's not super useful to try and dissuade clients of things that they hold as strongly held beliefs. Unless we can explore, like, is this causing them specific harm? Which I think is an important part of this conversation as well. And if you sort through some of the conversations or some of the comments in this thread, it is brought up in the idea of, is this orthorexic behavior? So from folks who are maybe unfamiliar with orthorexia, it is a compulsion or predisposition or an obsession with quote unquote clean eating. So trying to eat in a very specific pattern that may then result in disordered eating or something closer to or more akin to an eating disorder. So that would be where I would be starting to explore this conversation with someone, allowing them to share like, hey, this is why I think this is a concern. Cool. How does this pop up in your life? So as Anna mentioned, it's like, if this is not a real big concern for you, it's like you don't want to eat strawberries because of pesticides. And it's like, great, you never eat strawberries. I don't need you to eat strawberries. We can kind of leave the conversation there for right now and see if this pops up again in a repetitive pattern. And then we can explore it more deeply. But initially, it's like, I might not need you to do anything here. You don't want to do that thing. Check, check, we can move on. If you feel like, on the other hand, it does feel like it's a larger discussion and it's more prevalent in their life, then we may be looking at the idea of bringing in outside help here to help address those concerns a little bit more. Like, is this having a really negative impact in this person's life? Martha.
Yes, hi. So this has come up plenty of times in my 5 years now, and every client is in a different position. Like, some clients do this because they want to test you. Sometimes it's just this annoying thing that they have because they have a fixed mindset that there's something that they don't, I don't know, they don't want to eat. Let's say they may call it junk, but other people may call it, like, I don't know, popcorn. I don't know, whatever food that they are trying to avoid. So this person is trying to maybe make you think about how much they care about their nutrition by saying, I am not that person who eats junk food. And this is on a constant basis. If this person is always saying that and coming up with, I don't eat that, it might be worth to go back and ask the whys, and ask like, why do you think that a certain food is going to harm you? There might be reasons for it, and they might be something to discover there, maybe intolerances or something related to that, which I don't know, with another client that it came down to be that, to be an intolerance with the food. But anyway, that some clients are going to test you. Some of the clients are going to use it as an identity thing. So they're going to take it as a stronghold for them. Like, I am not that kind of person. And then other clients are just they don't know. They don't know what junk food is. So they're trying to seek the information, but this is more subconsciously, maybe. So every one of them is going to ask this question, or is gonna comment this from a different perspective. So it's different for everyone, I think. And also some other people, when you say, why is this? They become defensive. So we have to be very careful with those questions, because they might have a history of being dismissed, as you just said. No? So yeah, it's not an easy question. And I do have a client that is everything has to be pure. So pure, what does it mean? Pure for you. So it made me laugh the first couple of times, but then I realized that she uses that word because she feels that is more connected to her ethic way of eating, so I realized that the use of words also plays a role in all this. So yeah.
100%. You mentioned one in terms of like, if a client presents with like resistance or they become offended, where would you say that root more likely lies for that client in terms of their relationship to that food?
Sometimes it's more the resistance is more related to the relationship between two humans, and it's got nothing to do with nutrition anymore. Sometimes it goes beyond the nutrition. It doesn't really matter if it is an exercise that you're telling someone to
So
do.
that was a really loaded question that I asked you, but I knew that you would get to the right place. In that it's very much, as you mentioned, identity driven. So this is also amongst the reasons why I'm like, in terms of energy required between coach and client to have this conversation, if you're starting to sense that they're really tied into this, and your first instinct is to be like, well, I'm going to Google the crap out of this. I'm going to find 50 resources that disprove their idea or the concepts that they're sharing, and then that will get them back onto my side. If this is something that's very identity driven, and they feel defensive, it is likely because it feels like you're not attacking a food or a thought, you're attacking their identity.
Yeah.
And that is a hard place to start any relationship from, or even if there's an established relationship, it definitely feels like a significant bump in the road.
Yeah,
So
I will roll with it.
Yeah, by and large. And it's like, yes, definitely asking good questions to understand, hey, what is the relationship to this thing? Is this more based on an identity or priority? Is this based on kind of their experiential history? Like, when I eat this, I feel bad, even though there's no maybe established relationship for intolerance for that specific food. It's like, great. If you don't feel good when you eat pineapple, we don't need to have pineapple in your diet. That's perfectly fine. And then, yes, also there are some folks where it's like, I just kind of heard a thing online they don't seem to like they don't become immediately defensive around the conversation, and it's an opportunity to explore and to educate there and show your value. By all means, you can take that path. But if you're getting significant resistance, trying to think of like uh, yanking this thing out from the roots and stamping it out, it's like that might just be doing more harm than good in this relationship. And exploring if it's like this actually doesn't make a real difference in their life, they've already adjusted in ways that allow them to compensate for this thing. No need to rain on their parade on that front. That probably goes for a lot of preferences, dietary preferences, whether it's strongly held beliefs. If it comes from an identity standpoint, then if we can work with it, I would strongly encourage more coaches to do so than as opposed to trying to be correct. Cool. Any more thoughts on this one before we move on? I'm just going to check the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I wanted to ask if it's okay to kind of get an idea of how long they've had that belief, or how long they've felt that way about that thing, whatever you want to call it. I guess calling it a belief means it's not worth it, I suppose, in a way.
I mean, belief it depends on how they interpret it. It's like could be belief, could be idea. They could be synonymous here. Yeah, I suppose depending on how deep in the conversation you are, it could be seen as belief as like, oh, this is like a fairy tale that I'm creating as opposed to like hard scientific fact. Uh, it's always worth asking more questions to better understand as opposed to asking more questions to look for flaws in the argument. So if you're doing it with genuine curiosity and not to be like, oh, but you said this and now it's that, then I think that will generally come off as like bettering the relationship and furthering understanding between each other. Uh, it's just understanding it's like, okay, if I have an agenda and I have a set amount of time, how much time do I want to spend on this for today? Is it something that needs to be addressed early on? Is this something that we can roll with for right now? Or is this something a little bit more insidious that I need to keep an eye on for potential future changes in our plans, uh, including bringing in another professional if I believe that this is actually causing them harm?
Gotcha. You know what this is highlighting though for me, which is it's a coaching deficiency on my part, is I tend to be in a hurry to get to the truth at any expense. And so like you said, I think I'm ripping ideas I think aren't aligned with the truth and stamping them out, and it's hard on people. So it's just very interesting. That's a lot of it's, what was modeled for you and how you operate for yourself too. So this has just been a very interesting and illuminating conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good one. Again, I'd encourage folks to go back and check out the comments and potentially leave a comment yourself there if there's something you feel like is missing from that conversation. Uh, and yeah, Charlie, I'm just looking through the chat box here. Better to be kind than be right. I normally use better to be compassionate than be correct, simply for the alliterative value of it, but same idea, yeah. If this is something where it's like, I don't see this as being harmful, it's only something that they're kind of holding on to really tight. There's no reason for me to rip this from their grasp. It won't help our relationship. It likely won't change things from a nutritional value perspective. We can let that sleeping dog lie for right now and just keep an eye and tread lightly. And if it comes up again and we notice that it's having more of an impact, then we resume that conversation. Cool. We'll put this one to sleep, and then we have one more case study for today, and I'll share my screen momentarily. Cool. So this one is from Coach Brittany Burns. Coach Brittany is looking for something that may seem counterintuitive, at least from a business sense, but they have a client who they are trying to help achieve and establish more internal accountability, aka they want their client to take action not because their coach said to, but because it makes sense within the context of the client's life and within their own framework. So she gives a little back a story of client does workout because coach says to do the workout. Client will eat a specific way or a specific food because coach said to eat that specific way or specific food. This again is another really interesting conversation because at least in my interpretation, on one side, this may appear to be kind of like a dream client for a lot of coaches where it's like, hey, we have a conversation, there's clarity and mutual understanding on both sides. The next time I speak with them, ask them what they did, everything that we talked about. They're doing the thing, they're executing at a high level of consistency. We love to see it. We shake hands. I feel good as a coach. They're seeing whatever they want to see as a client. Everybody's winning here, right? But Coach Brittany actually does point out something that is potentially insidious in this relationship. It has a little bit of historical background as well. She mentions that this person kind of worked with the coach long term for multiple years, and assuming that they had that same pattern, they were doing all the things the coach said, they eventually got to a point where they just stopped doing the things. And they cited kind of like burnout and a decay in the coaching relationship that just like left them in a place where they just didn't want to do the thing anymore and potentially led them to seek another coach. We don't know that for sure. They're having success with the skills that they are acquiring from Coach Brittany. They're learning how to utilize their hunger and fullness cues and hand portions. But Coach Brittany is thinking a little bit more long term. And what happens at the end of that coaching relationship? How do we ensure that we keep one eye to the future? If this client does not continue to work with me, will these strategies still remain stable? Because again, as coaches, that is something that a good ethical coach should want, is that beyond the coaching relationship, the client takes the skills that they've learned and continues to implement them in a way that feels satisfying for them. So shout out to Coach Brittany for having that kind of foresight to make sure that they're asking those questions now. Vicky, something that you are actually, hold on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen first. Vicky, was there something you added in the chat box? Are you able to unmute and share?
Like I didn't know you were going to make me do that. I can't remember exactly. I'd have to go back, but there was something in my about, traps we get in, like the writing trap. And one of them was praising, like, good job, blah, blah, blah. And so sometimes when we're trying to be positive as coaches, we can exacerbate what Brittany's talking about. So if we overly praise a client, then they get used to having that, and then they don't feel successful unless they get that praise, like sending them the gold stars, etc. So it talked about using open questions to get them to draw that from themselves, to feel that sense of accomplishment, or however we want to phrase that, themselves. And so again, I'd have to go back and review it, but I thought maybe Jeremy would fill in my blanks here, about using open-end questions to say, how did it feel when you did blah, blah, blah? And so they draw it from themselves, that feeling good or feeling bad, or, whatever we want them to feel, rather than the coach directing that. That sounds kind of like what we learned. I don't know.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I could fill in the gaps in a second, but Gabor, unmuted, what do you have?
The concept of extrinsic motivation versus intrinsic, kind of tied into what Vicky is describing. It's like, you can give all the accolades and praise, but if they don't find the reasons that are really important to them, like, why are you doing this? What do you hope to get out of it? How will your life feel and look? But not because I told you so, or because the media told you so, or whoever told you so, but reasons that are really important to you, that you connect with. And so I think, in my opinion, exercises that help the person go inward in stillness and feel themselves and what their essence is, and what brings them joy and what brings them strength and power. Those types of inner reflections can help find the answers for an individual that goes beyond because I told you so.
Good work. I'm curious to know, how might you elicit those exercises from a client? Like, is there any specific exercise you would share with them? Is there any specific tool? Is there any specific question that you might share with them to help them start to think in that pattern?
So I don't know if you know, but I'm just doing the course. I haven't graduated.
Well, I mean, you're
Yeah.
on a good path here already because
But
essentially what you're alluding to is 100%. I mean, that's at least how I would also go about it, and it sounds like Vicky's in agreement there as well. Uh, if
You're
you've
what?
had a like parallel
well,
experience, maybe
no,
you have something
so
else to draw from.
yeah, so the reason I brought that up is because I'm actually what's called a PQ coach. It's a positive intelligence program out of Stanford University.
Makes
Uh,
sense?
and so that program is rooted in doing this type of work. And I actually signed up for this program not knowing how much attention you guys put on this part of the nutrition and healing and coaching. And the moment I started reading the first couple chapters, I got so excited because I'm like, this is exactly like the program I need to be with, because I believe through my own experience and through friends and family that the only health comes from addressing the mental emotional. I believe it's foundational. I do think everything works together as
Hmm.
talked about in the first couple chapters, but I also really, really believe that especially people who have trauma and they use food as their coping mechanisms and so on, until they find a way to go inward and deal with whatever they have to deal with and find that self-love and that self-compassion, that self-empathy, they will regress and they will fall and they will and this story, this case is a perfect point of reference because you know this person could be so successful and do everything, but the moment the coach goes away, there's a high probability that they're gonna regress.
Very well said. And I mean, yeah, if this is the skill state or point of reference you're coming in with as a coach right now, you're in a good place and you're in for some good things here, I think, to add to your skills. Dana.
Hi. I'm in a similar situation to Kavork. I just started the program, the PN1 certification program. I just started chapter 3. Um, my background is a counselor, so
Mhm.
I'm going to agree wholeheartedly with everything that he said. I think that immediately when I read this case study, it directly made me go to chapter 2. If the seasoned
Mhm.
coaches want to think back to think like a beginner and really identify this person's why list and the fact that they're not connecting anything that they're doing to themselves. It's all about pleasing their coach and doing exactly what their coach is telling them to do because you told me, because I told you that I would. I did the workout because I told you I would.
Mhm.
I counted, and they got burnt out with the macros coach because they were just tired of doing something that they were not personally connecting with. So I think that this study really needs to be addressed as separate, completely separate from working out or nutrition. It has to be focused on why is this person working with a coach in the first place? What are they trying to gain? What are they trying to do in their life? And how are they connecting to it? It doesn't seem like they have any connection. As Kavork said, there's no intrinsic connection. It's all about
Mhm.
I'm doing this for someone else, so there's got to be something going on there that this person is just looking to please and not necessarily trying to better their own life and their own self. So I think that's a whole separate conversation that a coach would have with that client.
Very insightful. And yeah, I mean, definitely this is one where people with a counseling or behavioral psychology background will likely see some things here and say, hold up a minute, this might be not necessarily related uh, to their exercise and dietary patterns. Certainly, I think the term people pleasing may appear here as being appropriate. Uh, But I do believe there are ways that we can, as let's assume that I'm not sure what Brittany's coaching background is, if it's entirely nutrition and movement, or one or the other, or none of them. Uh, but there are ways that, as let's go term here, nutrition coaches, we can still, I think, have a positive influence on this discussion through the work that this person has signed up for. Because keeping in mind, uh, they have likely signed up to work with Brittany for either body composition goals or some specific goals regarding nutrition. So staying within our scope of practice and not kind of trying to completely outsource the entire conversation. I think there's some positive things that we can do here as well. But I'll go Vicky and then Charlie to see what kind of feedback they have as well.
Yeah, so I had a comment in the chat group too, along the lines of what Dana is saying too. Like a lot of people go to coaches because they're looking for accountability, right? So to be able to, as coach, to steer them from, using the coach as a source of accountability to autonomy. So that's sort of our job, and hopefully what we learn through the PN process or our experience as coaches or counselors. But yeah, it's a fine line. Like, great accountability. We all need a little bit of that, but being accountable to ourselves, being accountable to another person. So
100%, Vicky. And yeah, I mean, I read through some of the comments before jumping on this call, and someone did point out, it's like, yeah, there are folks who thrive when they have accountability to others. It may be the driving force of why this person signed up with a coach again anyway. So maybe not inherently something that we need to work on, but certainly if we are looking with an eye to, hey, I want you to be able to function and still have the kind of patterns and use the skills that we've developed, even if I'm not present in your life as a coach anymore. I think it's worthwhile to have that conversation, and there may be some things that they can adjust in the coaching process to ensure that they're planting those seeds now for inevitably if this coaching relationship does not last until both death do they part. So useful point out regarding accountability and being accountable to oneself as well. Charlie.
I don't quite know where I'm going with this, but it was kind of building on what you said there, because I've only got like the one guinea pig, and yeah, when you were talking about kind of drawing their attention to that accountability, if I'm not here, being able to continue these skills and practices or whatever as they carry on. I actually just spent a little bit of time looking back over with a bit of more of a fine-tooth comb over our discussion since starting, and kind of drew the conclusion myself that maybe the goal that they said that they were coming in with wasn't actually the goal that they actually wanted. So they came in saying, I want to lose weight, and you do the 5 whys, and they go and dig down, and they're fairly confident that they want to lose weight for whatever their reasons might be. But actually, what was getting a lot of the positive feedback was just the general behavior change and the improvements in energy and things like that. And so actually, just, it sounds obvious, but kind of just showing them that, I've realized this. Like, if I like talk you back through what you said here and here, would you agree that you might not actually be thinking what you said at the start, and the benefits that you come in wanting were something different, and that actually was quite successful. So my guinea pig kind of shared that epiphany with me, and has taken the accountability upon herself now. There's no pressure from me really. I'm just getting messages every now and then saying, I tried this week and it's gone really well. Like, that's another week. She's finding her own bright spots. I'm not really doing. I'm just like checking in, going, wow, that worked, and yeah, like, keep it up, sort of thing. But yeah, a bit waffly, but hopefully you get the gist of what I was trying to say.
Comes through crystal clear, sir. And I mean, that is something. So a couple of things here to highlight. One, initially in this conversation, I asked Kavork to say, hey, are there any tools, are there any questions or any strategies you share with clients to help start to plant those seeds of, that intrinsic motivation and how to illuminate that a little bit more. And then Charlie brings it full circle when Charlie mentions bright spots. So one of the things that I would share with folks here is if you are completing your L1 certification or if you have access to L1 resources, check out Bright Spot Tracker. It is a form that we have where clients can reflect upon their own experience and note the positive elements of that experience. So if possible, I would encourage you to get familiar with that form and then bring those questions into your conversations. So one thing that I see as a vital part of my coaching is being able to give folks the opportunity to notice and name short-term kind of immediate benefits to the behaviors that they're working on, and then seeding kind of like a breadcrumb towards the long-term or medium-term benefits that they're trying to get. So an example would be, we're working on getting your step count up. The immediate value of this is I feel better when I go for a walk, when I get fresh air, when I get some sun on my face. It gives me time to de-stress. It lets my mind wander a little bit. My dog is happier and less anxious when I take them for a walk. Here are all the immediate things that happen right away. The medium-term benefits of getting my step count up would be, it gives me more structure in my day. I'm able to be more productive when I'm at work. It's something that I have to look forward to at the start of my day, and by the time it's like the afternoon and I get to go, I'm looking forward to it. And now that I've gotten to do it more regularly, I'm noticing some positive benefits in my fitness as well. And if I continue to do this for long enough and I get the numbers high enough, I'm noticing that there's a body composition benefit as well. So long term, it leads to this outcome much later on. I'm going to see that one way down the road. But in order to get to that long-term thing, so even if this client came initially for weight loss, we need to have the ability to notice those positives in the moment. It's what keeps behavior change rolling along when it doesn't happen on the time scale or we're working on a really long time scale. So for someone who's looking to see like that first 10 pounds of weight loss, it may happen in a really short time if they do something dramatic. But if we're not encouraging them to do dramatic things that are going to make huge changes, that may be a process of 6 to 10 weeks. How do we keep people engaged in the process? Giving them bright spots they see as soon as I do the action. At the end of the week, when I look back and recount the things that I've done, more on that medium time scale. And then much later on, the scale actually reflects those changes as well. So Bright Spot Tracker is really great for doing that. And it also means that I, as the coach, don't have to play cheerleader. So in that kind of accountability tango, where it's like you sit down, you share your week with me, I give you gold star, I give you a pat on back, high five. Like those things are great, but if it's the only thing that's keeping this train on the tracks, again, it's in a really kind of tenuous place. But if I make it a point as your coach to say, hey, tell me about the thing that you did. What was positive about that? What were some of the immediate benefits you noticed? And our conversation elicits more of those things. One, you will be able to see that you are the source of the good things. And I'm speaking from the client perspective. And then two, that client will associate that positive feeling with coming to sit down with you every week or every 2 weeks as well. So there's a benefit to your relationship as a coach as well. The more we can do this and relate, hey, your success is based on things that you do. Your positive feelings and attributes to this are based on things that you can control. Has a far greater likelihood of when I'm removed from the equation, when the coach is removed from the equation, this thing is going to feel stable and you're going to still remember why it feels good. I got an email from a client like maybe a month or two ago who I hadn't worked with, I think, in maybe 2 or 3 years. And they're just like, hey, I just want to let you know, I'm going through kind of like a transitional phase of life right now. It's rather challenging, but I'm still doing the things that we talked about and it feels good. And I'm glad that I still have those things. And as a coach, like, honestly, I was walking on cloud 9 for the rest of the day. I let them know. I said, hey, that feels really good. Thank you for telling me that. But mostly I'm happy to see that the conversations that we've had literally years ago are still replaying and offering you value. That's the thing that I wanted in that moment, and it was happening still in real time now. So, as much as it feels like sometimes we have to be the cheerleader to keep things going, if you can see that responsibility to your client, let them be their own cheerleader and give them really tangible ways to feel those positive feelings, you do them a great service, and you ensure that your impact lasts beyond the 6 months or the year or 2 years of coaching that you participate in. Kabak.
The bright spot tracker, what chapter is that in?
I think it's in the, if you look in your L1 resources, you should be able to find it. It may just be an independent sheet that exists somewhere, but essentially what we're looking for is kind of how do we tie specific actions to objective feedback. Let me see. It's mentioned. I know. I only remember that it exists because I spoke about it yesterday in our coaching business Kickstarter class. So I believe it exists. No information available. Oh, actually, hold on. Oh, here we go. Cool. It does exist. I'm going to put it in the chat. So you can take a look at that. And specifically the questions that it asks, add those to your coaching arsenal. So when you're getting kind of that feedback on, hey, how did things go? When you see that there's a potential bright spot there that the client is just like, well, I only did 2 of the 4 workouts that I was supposed to do this week, and my kids were sick the entire week, so I only got 2 of the 4. Instead of being like, oh my God, that's so good, even with your kids sick, I can note that, provide context, but then ask them, hey, how did those workouts feel? What about them? Like, what encouraged you to continue to do them? Because obviously it was quite challenging. Let them create the story for themselves of how they are more resilient and how they're doing positive things. And the more opportunities you can have to uncover those bright spots, the better those calls are going to be. Cool. We're kind of up on time for today. It is a rare time that I had 3 case studies and we got through all 3 of them. So good job, team. Any final comments or questions before we sign off for today?
I want to say thanks and to ditto on what Dana was saying. This session of unpacking these was really valuable and interesting, and I look forward to these types of meetings.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, we only started experimenting with this format for me and like within the last month or so. Coach Kate does things differently. She may adopt a similar approach, but also she'll have something of equal value, I'm sure. And every now and then we have a guest pop in to offer their insight into their area of expertise. But hopefully you keep coming to these and we can keep exploring more of these case studies.
Just a
Dana.
quick question.
Yeah.
I noticed that the calendar, I just happen to have this time available today. I normally don't. I was just wondering, might there be any opportunity for these to happen in more of evening hours rather than daytime hours? Any possibility of that down the road, or?
We pop around quite a bit. I'll be probably hosting maybe 1 or 2 while I'm in like a European time zone. So it might just happen to be earlier afternoon for me and evening for you when we do one of them.
Okay.
We try and vary them, but I will keep that in mind the next time I'm scheduling. I think we're scheduled all the way up to like the end of June, maybe. But I'll look for more opportunities for later day calls.
Okay. Thank you. Really great. I'm glad
Yeah,
I
no
joined.
worries. All right, gang. Take care and see you at the next one.